I want to begin with just a few words. This massacre in Pittsburgh, in the Tree of Life Synagogue, is, I imagine, for all of us, certainly in the Jewish community, but also throughout America, been devastating, scary, horrific. The word that comes to mind is a pogrom. Pogrom is the old word we used about Jews in Eastern Europe, and this also happened amongst Sephardi Jews as well, when a non-Jewish population, anti-Semitic population, would come forward and try to or successfully kill Jews simply for being Jewish. That is what happened here in our own country, and we all are dealing with the reverberations of what that means. There's a great author, one of my favorite ones, Jonathan Safran Foer. Maybe some of you heard of him. He talks about the fact that there are five senses to touch, hear, feel, etc. The Jewish people, we have a sixth sense, and that sixth sense is not an intuitive sense like intuition. The sixth sense is memory. And he says very powerfully in one of his books that when, sadly, our people are attacked by anti-Semites and massacred, not only do we feel the depth of the pain and fear and angst of what it's like in that moment, but we go back immediately to what it's like to our family members and brothers and sisters and ancestors during the Shoah, during the Holocaust. And then we go back a little farther, like my own grandparents, who rest in peace. So I said Kaddish for just this week is her yard site, who fled from Russia in Eastern Europe because of Cossacks who came into their town and burned and told them to leave or they'd be killed. But it goes even farther back. It goes back to the time of the Crusades and the Inquisition and the time of Roman conquering of the land of Israel. And in some ways it goes all the way back to Moses and Pharaoh and back to Abraham. Each one of these generations, sadly, tragically, having moments where anti-Semitism or anti-Jewishness rose up to attack us, not just in theory, but in practice, and it triggers all of that at the same time. And so what I want to say is, it is completely natural and appropriate that all of us are traumatized. This is a tragedy on its own, but it's a tragedy multiplied when we have a people that has memory sitting on our shoulder all the time. Which leads me to point number 2. Some have said to me, is this 1939? Is this what happened when Hitler came to power, a prominent with fascist leanings? Is this what happens? It starts this way. And what I want to respond, not being a prognosticator and not able to tell the future, only certain powers beyond me can do that, but say a primary difference which we have to remember and recall is that first and foremost, in those times historically, 1939 and before, when anti-Semites came to come and attack us and massacre us, kill us, even in our own synagogues, the police, the law enforcement, and the authorities sometimes perpetrated it, oftentimes held back and let the people go do it. In this case, law enforcement was running into the building, trying to save our people, while many were fleeing or sadly are being shot, killed, or hurt, and put their own self at risk. To say that is the same, in my view, is a big mistake. Big mistake. Of course, we need to take the type of security measures that we've been working on here at Beth Meyer. I'm proud to say we've been working on them for some time, but we will continue to work on them and we will increase them. And there's no question that those will include all the typical ways and ways we won't discuss publicly. And there's no question that we learn from our Israeli brothers and sisters. The Zionist message is that we're no longer the Jews that are going to sit back and we're just going to take it. We're going to do what's necessary to protect ourselves. But we can't do that alone. We have to do that with partners in the federal government, thank God, but also brothers and sisters that are here. I know that there are people here right now in our congregation who came for solidarity, show up for Shabbat, that are not regular members of our congregation, perhaps also not Jewish. So I want to take a moment here. If you are one of those people that came for solidarity and show up for Shabbat, could you just rise for a moment, please? We could recognize you and thank you for coming out tonight. I want to give a round of applause and thank you so much for being here. We thank you so much. Without your attendance and support, and not only you, but the hundreds of others and the notes we received this week, It's a statement that this is not 1939. This is different. It isn't the same. Now, there's a text in the book of Proverbs. It says, life and death is held in the tongue. Life and death. And there's some people like to say, well, that's an exaggeration, life and death. Maybe you just say bad things, lashon hara. But we all know how this starts. It starts, and this is such a treat to the Anti-Defamation League and those from the Shoah who tell us the best. Morris Glass, may rest in peace, will tell us. All those who've been experienced in our own congregation from the Holocaust will tell us. What it starts with is evil speech said by the riffraff and winked at by the leaders. The riffraff, I hate to tell you, I'm telling you nothing new. It always exists. Back in the Torah, there was the Egyptians. It's always there. They're always going to say anti-Semitic, white supremacist, racist, except xenophobic. And I want to be clear here. I said it before from this bima. They may start with a different group, like a migrant group coming from Honduras, but it's all connected. It's one group's focused on now, we're coming next. It's people of color then, it's Jews later. Muslims, it's all connected. So when the riffraff gets going, and sadly, there's a history that it never, I wish, we pray, but never fully goes away, gets quieted. The role of the Jewish community and of all of us who care, all Americans, is to squash it. But there are some of us in our world who have louder voices and potential to influence with more Twitter followers than others. Now, I know some people here in the congregation say, well, I love our rabbis, Eric and Jenny. They'll go up and they will say and they'll speak up. And believe me, I appreciate, and Jenny fully appreciates your support. And the vigil we had this past week, for those who are able to attend or watch in live stream, where nearly 1,200 people were in attendance here. The governor of North Carolina, the mayor of North Carolina. Originally, 20 clergy had RSVP'd to come. Over 50 ended up coming, just arrived. Vast majority not Jewish. It was incredibly moving. And we felt that huge hug. And it's upon all of us, not just your rabbis, not just the clergy, not just the governor. All of us have to say, when we hear of a leader, religious, civil, or political, who doesn't clearly denounce hatred against any group, not just us, but against any group, but especially against the Jewish community, we have to call them on it. Loudly, consistently, on the phone, on the email, in the letters to the editor. We have to call larger forces. We have to demand. It's not okay that certain politicians retweet anti-Semitic, links and say, well, I didn't really realize. You now know. We told you, and you're still not doing it. Then we're calling you on it. And it's not okay that our president said there were two good sides to Charlottesville. There's no other good side than neo-Nazis. Neo-Nazis are on this side, and everybody else on the other side. We have to call him on that. This is not whether you agree or disagree about immigration policy or agree or disagree about how we should deal with economic policy. That's for a different discussion, and we can have disagreements in our congregation. But when a politician or leader who has a bully pulpit is not clear in condoning and says, listen, the synagogue should have had an armed guard, that's what the problem is. As if Parkland didn't have an armed guard, as if we don't have armed guards. Armed guards are a part of the solution. It's not the number one solution. The solution is getting everybody else up to shut down these crazies, these idiots, and these disgusting people of the earth, to shut them down as much as possible. That's only going to happen, yes, through self-defense, but also through all of our voices. That is what we have learned. So I'm really pushing you, because I think everyone here is probably already in the amen corner, but we have to spread that message to people that aren't here and say, we don't want you just to come just out to the vigils and just to come out to light candles with us and only to come out to tell us how terrible it is and only write us notes, although that's beautiful, and we appreciate that profoundly. It's very important. But after the Shiva is done, we have to go out and tell the people of the world that this is unacceptable. And we have to be persistent. And I'd use the kind of Jewish nudginess. We got to be nudgy. We can't stop because it's uncomfortable. We have to be the voice that says this is unacceptable and push whoever it comes from. I don't care where they sit on the political perspective. It must come loud and clear, certainly from our community, but from everyone else as well. It's one of our favorite songs we learned in summer camp, Jewish summer camp. It's Rabbi Nachman of Bratslav says, Kol ha'olam kulo gesher tsar ma'od. All the world is a narrow bridge. He says the number one thing is not to be afraid. All the world's a narrow bridge, a bridge you'd be afraid to pass through. It's scary. There's two sides. You could fall. But number one thing is not to be afraid. I want to say here that everyone that comes to synagogue or involves themselves in the Jewish community going forward, it's understandable if you would be a little afraid. If some came in today and saw the police protection or CSS and feel afraid. We've had people in the holidays say to us, I see these people with the things in their ear. I'm a little afraid. It's understandable, given our history, given what's happened, given terrorism in the modern state of Israel. It's understandable to be a little afraid. But the way we give in to the anti-Semites is if we let that fear stop us from being Jewish. Stop us from going to shul like today. Stop us from having programs like we're going to conduct today. We cannot give in to them and make us so afraid that we cower. To be courageous means to be a little afraid, but go forward anyway in hope. That is what faith is. Faith is not blindly not being afraid. It's saying, okay, I stepped into shul today. Anything's possible. But we've taken proper procedures. We've done things that we can. And I'm not letting them stop us. That's what their message is. When terrorists come to the United States or to Israel, their goal is not just to kill, sadly. It's to make us so afraid we won't be who we are. And I'm proud of all of you for being here today. And I'm proud of you as you go forward. And if you feel afraid, don't think I have to ignore it. That's natural. But take that and balance it with the value of not going to let them win. And we're going to carry forward. What's my last teaching? In this week's Torah portion, it says, it's called Chayei Sarah. It's ironically said Chayei Sarah Michai, the life of Sarah in the first few verses, but it actually is about the death of Sarah. Sarah just died, and Abraham is buying the first plot for her, basically burial plot for her to live in. And when it describes how long she lived, it says she lived 127 years. But it doesn't say it 120, it says 100 years, and 20 years, and 7 years. Very long. And everybody knows the rabbis, they go meshugana on every single word. Why does it say such a long way? Just say 127. Why 100 years, 20 years, and 7 years? Rashi, great commentary, says, the reason is that because each of these sections, 120 and 7, were meant for goodness, l'tovah. They were good. It had great goodness in each one of those. But we have to ask a question on Rashi. Because if you know Sarah's story, she has a problem giving birth, right? She has Isaac only after a very, very long time. He's 99. And even more than that, her son Isaac, Abraham, what happens with Abraham? Thinks he's been told by God to sacrifice. Now, an angel stops in the end, but the trauma of having the idea that you might even lose your only son, this is just the beginning. Sarah had a lot of troubles in her life, struggles. If you asked her, was the first 100 that great? She would definitely have probably a straight answer, not so great, not so great. Very hard, by the way, very, very hard and traumatic, okay? So how can Rashi say 100 years, 20, instead all for goodness? It's l'tovah. And like the classic answer is because it's not that they were great. She suffered. She suffered big time. But she decided to take these experiences and not make her stop living, not let her crawl into a hole and hovel away and hide. She took them. She said, I'm going to learn from them. I'm going to grow from them. And I'm going to go back out into that world. And I'm still going to be the great Sarah Imenu, the great Sarah, mother of our Jewish people. And that is the message for us. We have been devastated. 11 souls. In a moment, I'm going to offer a prayer of El Malei Rachamim for each one of them. Prayer in honor of deceased. We've lost them. In our tradition, to lose one life is to lose a world. These are people that came into shul and sat in the back rows, like most Jews do at shul, okay? And they just basically came to daven, and they just were killed. A couple was shot, essentially holding each other. One rabbi described it that he heard the wife screaming, my husband's been shot, and then she was killed right there and heard her silent. This is serious and devastating, and we should absorb the blow of what that means. And the Jewish message from 2 millennia is that they will not stop us. Nobody's going to stop us. It didn't happen before. It's not going to happen now. It didn't happen with Sarah. It's not going to happen now. So our gut and our courage and our faith is that we are moving forward with a sensitivity, with awareness. We are going to sit Shiva, but we're going to get up from Shiva and we're going to go forward with what we believe. All of us. Not just the leaders, all of us. I know we will. Together. So with that, I'd like to close this with offering a prayer in honor of their souls called the El Malei Rachamim. It's a prayer honoring of their souls, the deceased. I invite all to please rise. If you'd like to follow, you can turn to page 336. And in this prayer, I will add specifically the names in English of the 11 holy brothers and sisters who died in the Tree of Life Synagogue. Malei Rachamim, Shochen Bamromim, Hamse Menucha Nechona, Tachat Kanfei Ashchina, V'malot Kedoshim HaTorim, Kezorakim Asirim, Lenishmot, Et Joyce Feinberg, Et Richard Gottfried, Et Rose Mallinger, Et Jerry Rabinowitz, Et Cecil Rosenthal, Et Bernie Simon, Et Daniel Stein, Et Melvin Wax, Et Irvin Younger, Shalchu Olamam, Began Eden Yemunuchatam, Anna Barachamim, Hastirem Beset Knafecha Olamim, Utzor Betzorchim Benishmoteim, Adonai Unachlatam, Vianucha Vishalom Mishkvoteim, Venomar, Amen. Exalted, compassionate God, grant perfect peace in your sheltering presence among the holy and the pure, whose radiance is like the heavens, to the souls of all those we have recalled today. May their memory be a blessing. May they rest in paradise. Master of mercy, may they find eternal shelter beneath your sheltering wings. May their souls be bound up in the bond of life. Adonai is their portion. May they rest in peace. And let us say together,